Morena, welcome. Welcome to our council meeting for the 18th of May. And this morning I'm going to invite Councillor Underwood to open our meeting. Thank you.
Good morning. In the Bible, in 1 Peter chapter 5, one of Jesus' disciples, the Apostle Peter, wrote to church leaders with some advice on leadership. What he wrote centuries ago is still pertinent for those in all forms of leadership today. I will read a few of his instructions. Shepherd the flock that you have responsibility for, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. Clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Shall we pray? Lord God, creator and sustainer of all things, you are all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful, and ever-present. You don't just hear our words, but you know our thoughts and intentions. Help us to exercise oversight of the Manawatu community, not under compulsion, but willingly, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over people, but leading by example. We ask for your grace so that we can lead with humility, and we ask for your wisdom so that the right decisions are made in this chamber. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. So this morning we have no apologies, full team here. Item 3, requests for leave of absence. We have one for Councillor Blackmore, and I'm happy to move that Councillor Blackmore's request for leave of absence from the 11th to the 18th of July 2023 be approved. Seconded by Councillor Ford. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 4 is the confirmation of minutes on page 6, and we have a recommendation. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I move that the minutes of the council meeting held 4th of May 2023 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Blackmore, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5, declaration of interest. Are there any items on our agenda today elected members would like to declare? None? Thank you. So we can go straight to item 6, which is our public forum. And this morning we have 2. So we welcome first up Rose and Terry. Please come and join us up at the table. And Rose and Terry are talking to us in regards to the Makino pools.
Just Rose.
Just Rose. Supported by.
Gosh, it seems a long time ago I ever did any public speaking. But anyway, thanks for letting me attend this council meeting today to share my thoughts on the reduced hours at the Makino pool and the responses received. I appreciated the response I received a week after my initial email citing staffing shortages, and I totally understand this. However, 2 hours on Saturday and Sunday, is it really a staffing shortage, or is it that staff don't want to work the weekends? This staffing issue has not been communicated to the public as the new hours go live or the lead up to the hours changing. If you're going to make a change by reducing the operational hours and delivering this affordable family leisure activity in the weekend, then there needs to be public accountability by profiling the issue of staff shortage in our community by the Makino Aquatic Centre. Similarly, the public deserves to know what the Makino Aquatic Centre is doing about it to remedy the immediate situation and timeframes for a possible return to normalcy, as well as a long-term plan to avoid experiencing similar problems in the future. Furthermore, prior to the pool manager's feedback, I sent a second email about the reduction of hours on the 2nd of May 2023, which was addressed to all councillors and the mayor. I received not one response. So I contacted one of the councillors, known to us, and was gobsmacked that the councillor seemed more interested in who else the email had been sent to and passing this email along to someone else to comment on, and had no thought, knowledge or opinion on the matter. But surely there is an issue of staffing causing the reduction of hours at one of our crown jewels, being the Makino Aquatic Centre, that ratepayers are funding. I would expect that all councillors would be abreast of the situation and able to comment. And when I've expressively contacted you personally, wouldn't you explore this issue and find out what's going on? You were voted in as a voice and an advocate of the people and report back to myself. I must say I was similarly unimpressed when making contact with this councillor about their lack of knowledge, interest and non-use of Facebook with links to the community and accessing and in reading community feedback such as posts about the pool. It takes time and effort to come along today and make my thoughts voiced. Those posts uploaded to Facebook should be a staple to all councillors' involvement in the community by keeping abreast of matters such as the delivery of the services provided at the pool. For those of you who are not keeping abreast of these Facebook posts, here is one I came across on the Fielding community page. Quotes, Makino pool closed at 11:45 a.m. today, just got caught out again for 4th time this year, trying to take kids swimming. Anonymous member, April 19 at 12:15 p.m. Can I ask how the decision was arrived at to shortchange the weekend hours specifically? Sacrificing the weekend seems absolutely crazy. What leisure time, when it now requires careful planning to assure you arrive in time to have an enjoyable experience? Can I also say what beautiful artwork for the new hours being offered at the pool? Beautiful. Anyone would think this was a positive thing. And given that the new hours are painted on the side of the pool at the rear entrance, it is clear to me that these hours are not obviously changing anytime soon. It appears that endeavours to recruit new staff have been advertised as far back as March from searching online, 2023. Can I just say that the Makino Aquatic Centre is in a prime position to tag onto all things council to advertise for pool staff, albeit the section in the Fielding Herald dedicated to council matters, the rates, the newsletters, and a sign at the pool attendants wanted would hardly go astray. As I mentioned in my emails, it appears that other pools in our region are not struggling with their hours posted online. Whilst we don't want to pinch their staff, maybe we could form alliances to create a pool of experienced pool attendants who are happy to assist at other pool sites in order to fulfil our services to our ratepayers across the region. Finally, with the reduction of these hours over the weekend, is it becoming too easy with no accountability to open and close the pool, causing concern and disruption to ratepayers as the Makino Aquatic Centre sees fit? Any questions?
Thanks, Rose. Thank you. Let's open it. Are there any comments or questions, please, from the team? Councillor Short.
Thank you, Rose, for your passionate talk to us today. I apologise, when you said you sent us all an email, I don't recall seeing it, so I've just looked it up. And I'm sorry, the reason I didn't read it was because it came on a business address about printing, and we get stuff in our junk mail from China and things all the time, and it didn't catch my eye. So I apologise if it had your personal name on it, I would have seen it. So I did overlook it, and I do apologise because I would have replied to you.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And just to let everybody know that Rose's comments are directed to me, that she contacted me. And at the risk of not asking a question, Your Worship, all I'm going to say is that I did read the email. I had forwarded the email to staff to get an update on operational issues that don't normally come across the desk in front of us. And before I had that response, Rose contacted me. To be fair, the lack of use of Facebook was a comment that Rose made to me. And at the end of the day, I do what I do on Facebook, but I did look up Markino Paul stuff and had a bit of a scroll through. But I just make those comments for point of clarification, especially around operational matters.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Bell.
Tēnā koe, Rose. Firstly, I want to acknowledge you coming in here today. I think it's really important for us as councillors to hear the grievances from our community. So ngā mihi ki a koe. Thank you. I think I just want to have, I would like to ask you a question.
Yeah, sure,
So
go for it.
for you and for what you know, what do you feel is the health impact that you think this has made to our community? So I know that you're speaking of the actual time, the
I can
logistic of
speak
time.
from personal experience. I
Right.
suffered a broken collarbone on the 26th of December. I have been attending the pool probably from February onwards, and I am going, so I know this impacts on me because I have been using the pool, and you can look up my records. I've got a 3-month ticket that was bought when these hours were being thrown into the mix. And I must point out too that when I bought that ticket, nobody actually told me that the hours were changing, but it probably wouldn't have deterred my thing because I know that I have to keep coming. So I have been doing this from a health perspective to try and get my shoulder moving, which is actually frozen, and I have difficulty moving my shoulders. Hence, I have been regularly attending the pool. And yeah, from a health perspective, there's people down there that are using it as a therapy sort of thing. But I mean, it's the weekend, for God's sake. I mean, you know, like it's only 2 hours. And I really ask the question, is it a staffing issue? 2 hours? I don't know. It's just crazy. It's shortchanging the public. And I go back, it's just accountability. If you're going to frame this in the community with these new hours, give an explanation why, because you're short paying the ratepayers.
Thank you, Rose. I think you've given us a lot to think about today. Ngā mihi ki a koe for your time.
Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. Thanks for your comments. I think we understand them. In terms of writing to all the councillors, that's fine, but I don't think it would be helpful for anyone if you got 12 different responses, particularly from governance people who don't actually have the knowledge of the operational staff. So from my perspective, I had an oversight to make sure that you were getting a reply from the appropriate person, which you did. And so, yeah, I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to respond. You may disagree, but that was my position.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you, Rose, for coming along today. I have a question around one of your comments around the staffing. You made a comment about wondering whether or not staff may just not wish to work the weekends? And I'm just curious, is that a perception of yours, or is there something you've heard that perhaps we don't know
Well,
about?
actually, in investigating this a little bit further, I thought I'll go down to the pool at night time because the pool was open till 9 o'clock. I'm thinking, shit, who the hell, uses a pool at that time? So I went down and I was going through it with one of the staff members at the counter. And I forget exactly the detail. Is there really a staff shortage or something? I said, and she said, "Oh yeah, probably. They probably don't want to work." And then her next couple of comments after that was, "I want you to leave." And it's just like I was just exploring what was actually happening at the pool between Monday and Friday, because how these hours had come about in the weekend. Could they not have, and that's one of the questions I'd like you to follow up on, is how did the weekend get picked on and not the other hours? But it does appear that there's quite a bit of activity happening at the night with the canoe polo, which I thought was perhaps only isolated to one night. But for the lady at the pool to tell me that she wants me to leave when I'm just asking a question and wanting to follow up in preparation to present myself in front of you guys, that was her thought.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rose. Thank you for coming today. And
Thanks a lot.
And I hear the passion that you have for the pool and also for your concerns. And like Councillor Hadfield said, it is an operational matter that we then, when those kind of matters are raised with us, we do raise them through our CE for the appropriate staff member to respond to you. But you have raised some points there that I and others will have taken note of and that we will follow up for you.
Cool.
Yeah. So,
Can I
sorry.
just say, jump in there. Is it, obviously you've got 12 people that's received 12 emails. Would it be better that somebody acknowledge that email and say that the manager of that department will be coming back to you after investigating what the issue is?
Absolutely. And again, my apologies, because that is normal procedure for myself as the mayor to do that. I can't remember the circumstances. It is something that I usually do. So for that, I apologise. And I know there has been information out through social media, but one of the points I've picked up is the need for council to have a look at how do we improve our communication around any changes that impact on the community, and for a whole lot of reasons exactly like you've raised this morning.
Yes, if you're going to change the hours, don't profile it looking like a really good thing. Explain to the people why we would be more tolerant, and if we had a view to the timeline that it's going to be rectified, let us know. But there's clearly an issue with the recruitment process. If it goes back to March,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. We will follow that up for you and come back to you.
Oh, am I allowed
So
to hop up?
appreciate you both coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. So 6.2, welcome Shelley. Come and join us at the table. Shelley's well known to all of you. Shelley's here today to talk about roading.
Can I just make a little update comment on the Makino pool as well as a user of it?
Sure.
With my grandchildren, when we were there yesterday having our swimming lessons, the teacher was on her 10th day. So, that's quite a long period of time being in a pool teaching various classes. And I did ask her about what is the process like, because in the old days, going back to my time, I can remember we would be training younger students and people to assist, running training sessions to get younger teenagers and that into learning to be lifeguards and all that sort of stuff. So I just wonder whether that might be able to be thought about a little bit. And I also agree with Rose that public notification is really important in communities because it is a great asset. And as a family, I know I take my children to swimming lessons because they're both working, but I know they like to go at the weekends. So that does interrupt into people's leisure time when they can't go as a family.
Thank you.
Right, now moving on, I'm actually here about something different. I have an apology from Felicity Clark for Apathy Community Committee and Doug Brodie with the Rangiwahia Community Committee. But we're here because we've raised the issue in our committee, our community committees around the issue of roading. We know that the contracts are coming up for renewal, and as a community in Northern Manawatu, we would like to have we want to have a process, be part of the process of giving some feedback. So we are wanting to have a community meeting at Apathy to discuss our issues around the roading and our both good and bad over the last few years, because there are still issues that we have concerns about as ratepayers. So we are wanting to call a public meeting, or wanting to call a meeting, should I say, and we would like roading and governance to be at that meeting so that we can provide you with our feedback over what we think is happening in Northern Manawatu on our roading.
Thank you. Thanks, Shelley. Yes.
That's it. Basically.
Thank you. You will recall it's a few years back now. We did have a
Yes.
meeting at
Yep.
the Apathy Tavern regarding roading.
Yep.
And we've just had one at Pahongana as well
Mm-hmm.
for that community. So it is something through the community committees. I'm sure we can pull together.
So we will go ahead and make arrangements with somebody
Could
about
you
having a
just-
public meeting.
Yeah, can you just check with, particularly with our infrastructure
Mm.
team, availability before you set the date?
It'll be at night, just so people know that.
Thank you.
Yeah. It'll be at the Apathy Tavern.
Excellent.
All
Okay.
right.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so any questions or comments?
Councillor
Yes,
Shaw.
thank you, Alison. Councillor Short.
That's all right.
Thank you very much. Timely to come in and talk about that. It's been a pretty challenging year in roading right across the country. I did actually go for a drive up with the Pahongana Valley and round Apathy at the weekend. And yeah, no, it's been, you know, the wettest summer on record. And the one thing that really affects the quality of roading is where there's water sitting around, and there's certainly been plenty of that. But yes, I agree, when the contract comes up for renewal, we do need to have a very close look at it. Also, one of the things we need to consider as a council is the minimum standards we're setting in our contract too low? Maybe, you know, sometimes people think it's the contractor, but maybe what we're asking them to achieve could be higher. So there's
Yeah,
things
your
in there
KPIs are probably need to be
for us
readdressed.
to look at.
Yes,
well.
yeah, that would be good. Thank you.
Councillor Belsky.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley, for coming in and having a talk to us. It is, there has been a lot of feedback in our northern region of a meeting like this. And so it's good that you've come in and presented it to us. So we certainly look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hadfield.
Just thank you, Your Worship, and just so that there's no misunderstanding. Seems pretty easy to do these days. That, for sake of clarification, Shelley, is that you're wishing these meetings to take place prior to the council reviewing its roading contract.
Yes, definitely. So I don't know when that comes up, but we heard it was coming up soon at some stage. So we want to be able to provide feedback over, and it's not just this year either. It is a 3-year process, because it's been about, hard to believe, Mayor Helen, but it's probably been 3 years.
Probably is.
Time goes past very quickly. So I guess that's the issues that people, some of those issues are still there. So Councillor Short may be quite right, and that the KPIs might be, minimum standards may be too low. So I think we do need to address that.
Thank you. It is worth having a discussion, but also remembering that if we raise levels of service, that also comes at a cost to our community. So that is a discussion we need to have.
Yeah, well, we might have to cut something somewhere else, but not the swimming hours at the Keno pool.
As you can see, it's a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah, okay.
So appreciate you coming today. Thanks on behalf of those communities, and we'll look forward to finding out the date.
Do we need, is there a time frame just for when that has to be done by? I'm not sure.
I'll refer to our infrastructure manager.
Morning, Shelley.
Morning.
So at this stage, the roading re-procurement timeframe is we're looking to go to an expression of interest to the market in June, which is next month, and that's just purely to work out the interested parties. And then between July and November, there'll be an early contractor engagement process with the ones that make it through the shortlisting. Then there'll be the discussion around the contract, the schedule, opportunity throughout those few months there for the community to feed into that in terms of your suggested public meeting. And then we review that in terms of the NZTA requirements. And we'll be looking to get a tender in front of council this side of Christmas, all going well.
Okay, so we've got sort of that middle of the winter sort of time frame.
We've got about 6 months, yeah.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Great. Thanks,
Thank
Shelley.
you.
Thank you. Thank you to you all. Right, so there are no presentations this morning, no notification of later items. So or recommendations, so we can go to item 10. We're on page 11. This is for your information only. These are the minutes from the Creative Communities Assessment Committee. And can I ask either Councillor Short or Councillor Quigley, is there anything in those minutes you would like to highlight?
I'm happy to make a comment. Yes, there was some very good applications this time, well, as there always is. And the hard thing for the committee is there's never enough funding for to go around for those that are being requested, but there was quite a range of activities that were supported around the district. And I might recommend to the staff, when you're walking downtown at lunchtime, call into the Fielding Art Gallery. At the moment, there is an artist on display there who some of you might know if you go to the gym. Stunning pen art, really worth a look. So we assisted him with putting on his exhibition. So do call in and have a look.
Thank you. So that's good. That's good to hear that we're still getting a healthy number of applications through that provision. And for new councillors, this is funding that we receive via the government from Creative Communities New Zealand, and it's allocated out to each council to open it up for applications within your own communities. For art, heritage, culture, have I got activities?
Yes, and there's a formula, Janine would be able to tell you what it is. There's a certain amount per head of population. So in the round that we've just had, we had $16,000 to distribute, whereas, for example, Palmerston North would have a lot more because they've got a higher population. So the funding that we received is based on, it's something like 60 cents per person in the district, something like that.
Thank you. Councillor Quigley.
Yes, I was quite impressed with the presentations, and they were somewhat diverse group, but I managed to give away the whole 16,000 to pretty much all of them. So
it's great, and it's excellent that we can support the community in the arts and culture and heritage. Thank you, Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the cadence of these application rounds. How often does this happen? Is it 16,000 once a year or more frequently?
I think we're back to normal now, which is twice a year, because during COVID times, they actually had some extra rounds to generate some community spirit, I guess is the word, but it's twice a year.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move to the officers' reports. We're on page 18, and first up is the district plan review update and the Manawatu growth strategy. So welcome our team up. Morning, Matt and Lynn. Welcome. Take the report as read, but I'll hand it over to you to take us through it.
Thank you, Worship, and tēnā tātou, Morena councillors. So this report is on the council's strategic planning program. In light of the national policy statement on highly productive land, council does need to make some decisions around how we progress with the work. There are two main recommendations. So the first one I'll just speak to briefly is around the need to advance a Manawatu growth strategy. So really that on the back of the national policy statement, highly productive land, we do need to make do some work in the growth planning space, how we're going to grow over the next 30 years. That will help us complete the district plan review project and make sure we are ready to participate in any regional spatial planning, which might come soon with the reform of the Resource Management Act. The second main recommendation is that council is at a point where we could release the rural and flood hazard zone review for draft feedback, and that's essentially where we're up to. A draft means that we can get some good community input. We can talk about the matters that have fallen out of highly productive land, the updates to flood hazards, and get some feedback before finalising that. That work is essentially in a place where councillors can signal that we can be releasing that once we've wrapped up the last few parts of that. The reason why the recommendation does look at some options and assessments around the rural review, and essentially, there are risks and costs and things that we need to consider. Probably the one that why the recommendation stands there is that any subdivision that happens as a controlled activity at this point in time isn't subject to the national policy statement on highly productive land. So essentially, for a long time, there have been some concerns around the loss of highly productive land in the district. And until such time as the district plan is reviewed, that could still continue. So essentially the recommendation is it's worth exploring that and taking that further. But again, let's have a chat about that and get some council direction on that point. As with all things in the planning subject matter, it is a changing environment that we're working in, and RMA reform, new national direction might come in. So there are recommendations around just noting that things might need to change and be updated as we progress with this work, if something that comes out on that point. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Matt. The question I had, which I just can't get my head around, I thought when the legislation came out about highly productive land, it was effective immediately, but you're saying it doesn't apply to our current district plan.
In certain circumstances. So essentially the national policy statement is a policy statement, as in title. A policy statement isn't rules in a plan. So it relies on the words in the plan to enact it or to make it happen, to implement it. If your plan doesn't provide a connection point to that, then it doesn't apply. So for example, and I've used an example in the report, you could have a situation where someone under the current subdivision rules, it might be a controlled activity. A controlled activity council can't say no, therefore the NPS doesn't apply and that application continues forward. If for whatever reason that activity is not controlled and it defaults, maybe it doesn't comply with a rule or something like that, and it defaults to a higher order category, then the NPS could apply and that weighting would come in. So it's a bit nuanced. Essentially, the expectation, of course, is in time that our plan would be updated, and the national policy statement is worded in such a way that the regional council would do their work first, and then council's district plans would respond to that. For us, the advice is that controlled activity status warrants continuing the work because there is a bit of a disconnect here.
Thank you. And my other question was around the growth strategy. So I'm assuming if we go ahead with the growth strategy, we're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. We've obviously got a strategy, so it'll be about reviewing that and making sure that it's fit for purpose. So my question is, why 6 to 12 months timeframe?
I think I agree with the comment. And I think we're not starting from scratch in terms of there's a lot of work completed by council to date, whether it's work in the future planning in the infrastructure space or feedback that council's had on previous consultations, and even making use of the upcoming long-term plan, early engagement. You know, there is content that we will be receiving and can advance. I think that's just giving us some space to think about what the specific scope is, because a growth strategy could mean a lot of different things to different people and the level of detail that it gets to. I think we need to be moving fast, and so we should be doing it. We should be focusing on what's important and keeping the scope limited to get it done, and then we can implement that down the track and review.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess the bit I'm struggling with is the need to make sure that we are well. We have the facts and the evidence to back up what we're trying to do, but I'm also conscious about the RMA and the speed that that's all being pushed through, and we want to make sure that we can control as much as we can before it's potentially taken off us where we want to go. Otherwise, we have no say in.
Can I respond? Thank you, Your Worship. You're right. It is really important that the growth strategy is a priority. And one of the reasons that we've had in between 6 and 12 months is there is some aspects of technical information that needs to be included in the growth strategy as well. And so, you know, that'll take a little bit of time to be able to be completed as well. And as Matt says, as part of the long-term plan process, we'd be hoping to you know, jump on board with that and ask the community what they thought around some subjects as well, which will take a little bit of time.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm quite concerned about the delay in us making progress on the rural plan review. And I also had some reservations around the 6 to 12 months. So the growth strategy might delay everything. I'm really struggling with the fact that the rural plan review especially has been something that's been talked about and very little progress has been made. I think in terms of, so there's a couple of questions and a couple of comments, and I'll just go through them just so I don't forget. And I'm wondering how much of this is predicated on reforms that do not actually form any part of legislative requirement right at this point in time. And we do talk a lot about reforms that are coming. Well, in my view, until a reform's actually a reform, it's actually not worth the bloody paper it's written on. We might get a bit of an indication, but there's no legislative requirement for something to happen or for us to do something until it's actually legislated. And you know, I wonder if any of this is based on the potential for reforms, because we know that could all change on the 14th of October. So that's one question I had. In terms of mapping, and I think we've had this discussion before, I think to have any surety or confidence about the fact that Horizons may or may not undertake mapping to a level that would actually be useful in an affordable manner is something that's probably actually very unlikely. You're the experts in this area, but personally, I can't see Horizons actually taking this by the cudgel and having a really good crack at it. So I'm wondering whether or not actually all of the mapping stuff that's actually going to end up once all this comes into place is actually going to be requirements on individuals to actually prove whether or prove actually what class their soil is over their land holding. So I personally don't think that we can rely on Horizons to actually undertake anything in a meaningful manner that will provide us with answers that will be affordable and probably acceptable to our community. And I guess when I read some of this stuff, I honestly sometimes wonder what drongos write this stuff in Wellington. And I struggled with, and 419 is a good example. Territorial authorities that are not tier 1 or 2 may allow urban rezoning of highly productive land only if, and I look at C, the environmental, social, cultural and economic benefits of rezoning outweigh the environmental, social, cultural and economic costs associated with the loss of highly productive land for land-based primary production, taking into account both tangible and intangible values. And I thought, for goodness sake, couldn't somebody actually write that in English? I think, as Councillor Blackmore pointed out the other day, there's actually an act now that requires plain English explanations for stuff within government departments and within government. And I think that's a prime example of actually writing stuff in a manner that actually the ordinary people can understand. That was just a little bit of a rant, that one. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Short.
Thank you, Grant. We're getting used to your rants. I'd just like to highlight that this is going to trigger our significance and engagement policy. Not many of the things that we do that. So it is important that we do it right. And while we do want to progress as quickly as we can, there's been a lot of outside influences through this process with changes of legislation and the review of the RMA and having to rely on other agencies like Horizons to provide certain information. And as Grant mentioned, why this triggers the significance and engagement policy is because it will impact the future social, economic, environmental and cultural wellbeing of our district. And actually, believe it or not, the RMA, the number one priority is actually economic. So, we certainly want to protect our highly productive soils, but we also are then challenged within the Manawatu district, now that they've included class 3 as well as 1 and 2. That leaves us in the position of having, is it 40% of our land falls into that category? Some would say that's a good problem to have. I'm sure there's districts in New Zealand that don't have any class 1, 2 or 3 soils. So it's we've got to get it right.
Thank you, Matt.
Just a point to respond to the recommendation to advance a growth strategy. That is not a determinant factor for continuing the rural work. So just to clarify, the recommendation is we would just get on and consult on a draft rural. Doing it as a draft means that can happen at the same time as we continue work on the growth strategy. And then that means that again, because it's a significant issue and we do want to discuss and hear feedback from the community, that will mean that the notification of that rural review will be able to happen sort of in time and thinking with the growth strategy. So we can, the idea is that the growth strategy doesn't stop the preparation of the continuation of rural review.
Thank you. Councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thank you. It concerns me greatly of the lack of progress I believe we're making in the rural review. The land is changing in a way that will never be reversed. And we've talked about the rural review for years, and we really haven't progressed at all. And that, like I say, concerns me very greatly. The other concern I have is you've mentioned that our belief in that the subdivisions had stopped is not the case. And that I take it there are still applications coming in to be subdividing land. And we've been under the impression that for the last 12 months, the government's decree was to be that there was to be no subdivision. And now we find out today that that's continuing. And that also is a concern that, the advice we've had has been false. And that's a deep concern.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that advice? I'm not sure that I agree with Councillor Quarry in that no further subdivision.
We've had a few workshops with councillors, and I would say that I've provided advice around how that's been accurate. I think it's a really complicated thing, and it's a really challenging thing in terms of new essentially legislation coming out and being fully working through the details, because again, something is written over here and we've got to apply it using our current plan. That is going to take time to understand, but essentially everything that's been presented to council in the last 6 months since this has come out has been on the basis of there is some subdivision that could continue.
Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, so I'm going to pose the 3 of them, and then if you forget, I can remind you. Thank you. I just wanted to be kind of crystal clear on some things. So you've mentioned that there are things called a controlled activity that would progress, not subject to the policy statement, versus something that's not. And I'm wondering if you could perhaps give me an example of what those are, just for my clarity, please. You've expressed in the document a frustration that perhaps Councillor Quarry has just given me a demonstration of around a lack of progress. And I'd just like a little bit more context of that frustration and where it's coming from. And then the third thing is I'd like to be clear on the recommendations in the document at the beginning of the recommendations, and then on pages 28, 29, you've got option 1 and option 2. And I just wanted to make sure I was clear which of those options that you've actually recommended that we might consider today. Thank you.
Okay, so there's an example in my report around controlled activity. So page 22 of the order paper, I believe, at paragraph 315. So essentially it comes to the relevant issue for the Manawatu is our rural zone is still what's called a first generation chapter. So it hasn't sort of been reviewed to date, and controlled activity is very unusual as a subdivision rule across the country right now. It's very unusual for subdivision, apart from a boundary adjustment or something like that. But essentially, in the controlled activity example that's there, our district plan rules are framed in a way that yes, people can cut up land, rural land for smaller lots, with the premise that you would have kept the balance for a productive farm. So in the case of, say, a 60 hectare rural one title, if it's not previously been subdivided, that person has what's called entitlement, which is the framing of this rule, and someone could then create 6 new titles down to 8,000 square meters or greater. Okay, and they've got to keep the balance. And so in that kind of case, controlled activity, MPS doesn't apply. If for example, there was a trigger point and maybe someone had previously subdivided and they didn't have entitlement anymore, therefore that subdivision would be what's a higher order category, for example, discretionary, and then there is a direct link to the MPS, which says that document then applies. Okay, so it's a little bit of I think it's an element of uniqueness to the Manawatu because we do have a lot of controlled activity subdivision still. Second question around progress. So, and I think, it's fair to say that there is some, the rural review has been a challenging piece of work for the community and council. And there are competing interests. The comment was made by one of the councillors before, 40% of the land is essentially highly productive based on how this has been defined. That's actually a positive thing in terms of what drives the district and the economy, and that's who we are. Rural living has always been part of the mix too. And I think the comment would be that finding the appropriate balance to saying, well, yes, we are a rural based, provincial, there is going to be rural living, and that should be part of the future. No one's really challenged that. It's how do we give effect to it? And there have been a couple of different draft consultations over the last few years. And I would say we'd actually landed on a place which was probably quite good. But we now have to respond to new national direction, which is being more prescriptive in how we respond to that. Okay. Last question, options. So there were 2 options essentially on that you've referred to around, I focused in on with response to what do we do with the rural review, and essentially that what you referred to is 2 options which I think required a little bit more analysis and evaluation to say, what do we do? And one is to say, we progress and we continue to moving to a draft plan change. And the second was that we could just wait, and we could wait until the regional council has done the mapping work, establish the new regional policy, and then we would respond at that point. I think the risks in the evaluation completed say, it is actually worth us continuing because this has been on our books for a while, and because of the concern, again, subdivision can continue. We will have to potentially do a second round of the rural review in response to whatever Horizons lands on.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thank you. I need a little bit more clarification in regard to the subdivision, in regard to the period of time that's elapsed since the title was created. So if you've got a block of land which may or may not have had a title taken off, is that then deemed unable to be subdivided further? Or can you say, you quote a 60 hectare block where they can take up to 8 sections off? If they've taken off one title, does that still allow them to take off the remaining 7?
Technically, I'll only answer in a very broad sense, but yes, that's the idea. The idea is that from the start point of a title that existed at the date of the plan in 2000, there is a finite capacity for further subdivision. One of the challenges of the current plan is that tracking that system is not easy. So you have to be able to go back in time, essentially, and work out how much subdivision has already happened, and that will dictate technically if there is entitlement still, or if your entitlement has been used up. So essentially, yes, you're right. It is based on a period of time, and at that point, that dictates how much further subdivision you could do.
Well, that's basically no change at all to the existing plan, isn't it?
No, we're talking about the existing plan.
That's so. Yeah, unless that's changed.
And that's what the rural review is. The rural review is saying that system needs to be updated. Let's update it. We're not actually, nothing's tabled about what the rural review will be. This is just focusing on, let's keep, does council wish us to keep moving on that topic?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few questions, a few comments. I'll start by saying that I support the concept of the growth strategy. I don't want it gold-plated, and I support it on the condition that the timing doesn't, on the basis that the timing works for us. And so my first question is, if Mr. David Parker was sitting there and I asked, when do we lose district planning to the regional committees, what would he say?
He wouldn't answer, because he would say it's in the select committee process and they were responding.
Okay, what's your best guess?
It's very much an unknown. Like I really wouldn't want to. Lynn might be able. Do you want to? No.
No.
Okay.
I suspect it's a Shane.
Yeah.
No, it's not even a Shane, and I think it's probably a little bit unfair, Councillor Ford, because if you can work out what the politicians are doing, you're probably doing a bit better than what.
Well, I think that this highlights the answer is perfect, actually. So that's exactly what I was wanting, and everyone running for cover. And so the timing is crucial. In a nutshell, my position is that we want to, in order to do the best for our community, we want to finish rural plan change, residential, and business. And I note with disappointment that the business is not in the work plan going forward. So that's a point I'd like to make. But I think that if we finish those 3 areas off, and hopefully done the growth strategy as well, and then everything's taken off us, then we've done the best for our community, and that'll probably last 10 years in all probability, maybe more. And that's the best that we can do. But if by doing the growth strategy, it slows down rural, residential, and business, then and there's risk that it all gets taken off us anyway, and all we've done is the growth strategy, then I don't support it. And so that's quite important. Another question is, and this one's not quite so loaded, how does the proposed growth strategy compare to what I'll call Rangatahi District Council's, I think they call it their spatial plan, which I've had a very good look at and actually was really impressed with. Is it, but it's called a spatial plan, I think, instead of a growth strategy. Is it similar, or are we looking at something quite different?
I'll answer the second question first. So we've been over and talking with Rangatahi too, just to make sure we find out about their project and what they've been doing, and I agree that there's some really positive work there. I would say that one of the main differences is there was a lot of work done with specific communities on their townships, and what that would mean. For us, in the interest of time, I would say we're more leaning on the existing work of the community committees and their community plans, and so that kind of element wouldn't be part of our work. We're responding to the work the community has done, so that would be one difference. And then the second one would be, they have zoomed in on the different locations. Well, we're going to do that. We have to zoom in, I think, on the different locations. And then they've also talked about, one of the critical inputs to that piece of work was a technical document which says, hey, your population is going to be XYZ in 30 years' time. That means you need X hectares of commercial, industrial, residential land. And so, again, that's the kind of thing we do. So I'd say there's quite a few similarities in terms of the approach that they've taken.
Thank you.
The first question, my advice is that the growth strategy actually helps us to continue and focuses the work on the reviews of, say, the residential review that needs to happen, as Councillor Ford has raised. The absence of a growth strategy does, I guess, make it more difficult if you don't have a plan of what you're going to, where you're going. In the report, I have just highlighted that we should start thinking about separating out review from expansion. So take the residential zone, for example. In previous work, we've often bundled these two ideas. It might be that we need to, in the interest of time, start thinking about them being separate. So one, let's just review the current rules, allowing for intensification of fielding, working through what does that mean, what's required. None of that requires any kind of additional work that the MPS HBL asks us for. It is only when we're looking at expanding onto highly productive land that you would then need to do that additional work. So maybe as part of our approach going forward, sort of seeing these as not bundled together, but two separate things could be helpful for us continuing with our district plan review.
Thank you, Matt. If I may continue. So we're talking 6 to 12 months. I'd certainly support 6 months. Cost, we talk about it being the cost being included within existing budgets, but we don't actually name the cost. And I think that would be something that we would be interested to know. The growth strategy at 4.10, which is on page 25, it stresses that unlikely to identify a rural lifestyle zone, I accept that. The focus will be on future urban expansion of fielding or the villages. I would just make the comment that I think it should also focus on rural subdivision, not a lifestyle zone, but rural subdivision, because I think that's important to us, particularly on classes 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's been pointed out that 72% of recent subdivision has been on highly productive land, which actually means that 28%'s been on not highly productive land. And so while it has been the minority, it's still significant, 28%. And once the highly productive land option has been taken off us, well, I would expect that 28 to, well, I guess it goes to 100, doesn't it? Because that's all you can do. But I think that people will look. Of course, they're going to go for the easy option, the flat option, while it's there. But if it's taken away, I think they'll still look at the other options. You go to 4.13 on page 26. And you've basically given us two options, and you have spoken, and I take, my understanding is that you're really recommending the first one, number one, and I certainly support that as well. So that's me. I'd like to get rural residential business growth strategy done before it's taken off us. That's, I guess, and that may mean prioritising those things over other work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
Did I understand you to say that the purpose of the rural review was to stop these controlled activities happening?
That would be, I'd say that would be one of the number one issues. And from previous consultation done in the past, when we've sought feedback about how is the current rural district plan rules working, there's not a lot of comment. Like most, it's not really an issue that, there's no issues that really are highlighting, except for this kind of question about rural living and the loss of highly productive land. So that's been sort of I guess the key issue of what do we do about that?
And one of the key reasons for that is, of course, the obvious highly productive land is so important to our economy.
And the controlled activity rule doesn't.
And yet it's fine for you to plant it in pine trees, which takes it out for 20, 30 years. It's just totally rubbish. I'm noticing all through here that it's avoid lifestyle, avoid lifestyle, avoid lifestyle. And this is obviously coming from the government. Do you think this has got anything to do with, we're hearing now, managed retreat? They don't want people to be self-sufficient living in the country. They want them all to be retreating into the townships. Is that what you're hearing as part of the?
No, I think when you read the commentary that comes out came out in advance of the national policy statement on highly productive land, it is essentially that New Zealand is losing land for food production to housing. And that was the start point. That's always been the point of why central government felt the need to introduce a national policy statement, because the current RMA planning framework had nothing in it around the value of highly productive land for New Zealand's future food.
And yet you can't eat pine trees.
I believe there's some review work going on around plantation forestry, because there has been a few questions raised around what the current policy settings are around.
Well, the whole sense of the thing is just one other question. 72% of subdivisions since 2000 has been on highly productive land. There was talk in council about the fact that we were only looking at protecting classes 1 and 2, and then the government put in class 3 as well. Have you any idea that if you took class 3 out, what that percentage would be?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, we've got we could find that out and come back to you.
Yeah, it would just be interesting to know, because myself, the fact, my position on this is, I've always been, if people want to live rurally and look after themselves as far as food is concerned, because they've got a lifestyle property on which they can grow food, I don't think that we should put anything in their way that stops that, especially when at the moment the government policy statement is avoid and, it's not a law, as you said, and it's up to us, especially those controlled activities. If we can progress some in the meantime before it becomes a law and it's absolutely stopped, especially if it's on class 3, I can't see any reason why we would want to stop it.
Councillor Ford.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify a point that I made before. The reason I want to have rural residential business done and dusted before we lose it is because I strongly believe that this council does a better job of district planning than the proposed new regional committee with one representative from Manawatu District Council. And we don't know whether that one rep would be a staff member or a governance member. So the people of the northern part of the district, they're slightly cagey about fielding people getting involved. Imagine if it was people from Wanganui and Palmerston and Ruapehu deciding what should happen at Apathy. So I strongly believe that we're in a much better position, and we do a good job than this proposed regional committee, a new layer of bureaucracy.
Thank you, Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to go back to a point of Councillor Hatfield's around the mapping. The technology for establishing the profiling of soil, from when I understand the maps that Horizons have, it was somewhat, the world's moved on from that. So is our situation going to be that we default to those maps should someone apply, or is there going to be provision for those landowners to use current technology to soil profile, which then would be permitted to then, if you like, override or replace the Horizons maps?
Yeah. So it's a good, really good question. So the system is that Horizons is responsible for establishing mapping, and they will do that. There's an opportunity for collaboration with the TAs. I guess that will be explored in time. And there's two choices. One, the regional council can use the New Zealand Land Resource Inventory, which the old maps, as the start point, and they're not required to do more than that if they choose to just start with that, or they can look at more updated mapping, and that may, as we understand it, may include work that private people have done, but the regional council would need to have a system of absorbing that. I think there's a point of difference between prior to the regional council doing, essentially establishing the map, and then after. It's not clear, I guess. Certainly in the time being, I think there's potentially space, if the regional council wanted to look at, to seek to have people submit or provide information around mapping that they've worked on to the regional council. After that map is finalised, let's say that map's finalised, Lynn is a property owner and wants to do some work. Her land has been flagged as highly productive. Her mapping then becomes part of any resource consent that she would do.
Thank you. So before we go to those recommendations, there was a question I had. You've said that your preference is option one, and that's what I'm hearing loud and clear. We support too, that we just get on with it. And you said that it's ready to go public on the draft, and we could do that at the same time as the growth strategy. Do we need to include that in the recommendation? Okay, so that covers it. I just wanted to make sure.
The recommendation in recommendation 3 refers to council completes work on the draft rural and flood hazard review this year. It is essentially almost ready to go. There's a couple of sort of final pieces to put together, and as well as that, one of our consultants will be away for the month of June. So I think it's probably going to be July at the earliest, maybe slightly after that.
Okay,
but we'll just
thank you. Yeah, I thought that's what that meant, but what I'm wondering is, to make it absolutely clear about the direction we want to go, is to add to that recommendation alongside the work of the growth strategy, so that it's very clear that we're doing the growth strategy, but we're also going on with this, because that just says this year. It doesn't say we're going to do it as well as alongside it. Maybe it's me overthinking it, but I want to make it really clear that we want to get on with it while we're doing this other work.
We can add that, Worship, It also, at the last page of the document, which is page 36, it's got the timeline of the work. And so that, demonstrates that actually there's the district plan and the growth strategy are happening at the same time.
Absolutely accept that, but at the end of the day, people go back to the resolutions that were made. So I'm wanting to make sure that our intentions for our direction are really clear in those recommendations, so that if it ends up being delayed and we go back to the recommendation, well, it said just this year. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, I have similar concerns that go further in relation to residential and business. And so I would find it really hard to support the recommendations as they stand, because they don't satisfy me in terms of the other aspects of what I think is really, really urgent. And I won't repeat why I think the business zone work is urgent, because I have mentioned it many, many times.
So what would you be suggesting we do to add to that?
Well, at the moment, we've just got told, we're told in here that the business is not even in the work program. So that's just completely wiped.
Yes.
And the residential, we've got a draft late 2024, I think, notify in 2025. For me, that's very slow.
Yeah.
We will refer to Shane on this, because we've got constraints, obviously.
Quite happy to escalate that work if council wants to give us some more money and approve some more resource, but we're working with a finite resource here and finite budgets. So we have prioritised. And if you recall, the growth strategy was not part of the annual plan review or the district plan review. That was brought in as a result of the HPL, the MPS, and as a way of navigating our way through the MPS and as part of the rural plan review. Because when we presented the rural plan review to council, there were concerns around the likes of nodal and other areas within the plan. So the way around addressing that was to have that growth strategy introduced. So the growth strategy has come in as an additional piece of work, fairly significant piece of work. And something's got to slide, and unfortunately it's been that.
Councillor Ford.
Well, I don't accept that. $500,000 a year from memory is what we put into district planning, and year in, year out, every year. And when I first started on council, the budget for the entire review of the whole district plan was $750,000, and it's now $500,000 a year. Councillor Campbell nodding his head in agreement. So the way the government's working on this at the moment is that a lot's going to be taken off us anyway. So I just think that this is one of the highest priorities pieces of work for this council. And just to say, oh, well, that's just going to have to slide. I don't accept that. I can't support this.
Thank you. The other concern I have is that we are aware of potentially big developments, big private investment wanting to come to our district, both in residential and business. And we have conversations with these people. And the one thing they're seeking from us is the certainty to keep the process smooth. And and we're saying we will work with them. And part of that process is us needing to complete these reviews for residential and business for them to be able to do what they want to do. So it's a real balancing act, I get it, but we can't be saying to these potential investors in our community, yes, we will work with you, we will, and that's what we're saying to them, because I've been part of those meetings. But if on the other hand, we're not able to change, to review the residential and business parts of our district plan, we've done nothing to support their potential investment in our district. Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just from a personal experience, I found it necessary to find another commercial premises, and I was shocked just how there is nothing at all in the Manawatu in this district at all for commercial business for business to set up. And I concur with what Her Worship says, is that we're trying to encourage business, but we have no home for them.
Okay, so we need a way forward. So we have some recommendations there. I guess we need to test those. There was my suggestion about making recommendation number 3 a bit stronger around alongside the growth strategy. Yeah. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, Your Worship. Look, it seems like we may have a bit of an impasse here, potentially, and I think for me, I think obviously the recommendations may need to be tabled separately. In terms of recommendation 3, in terms of the draft rural and flood hazard review, if you think that's time sensitive, this year could easily be changed to by the end of the 3rd quarter or whatever, so that it puts some definitive timestamp on that actually to be completed or to be ready to go, if that finds favour. The Deputy Mayor's raised some interesting points. I think where I won't say I'm struggling a bit, but where I'm seeking a bit of clarity is actually what are the side effects of us not accepting that a new growth strategy is required. So what are the negatives on that if this particular piece of work is actually going to hold up other stuff, or as the Deputy Mayor suggests, interferes with perhaps another priority list.
Shane.
If the growth strategy doesn't progress, then the rural plan change will just go ahead as per how we have prepared it. But then you will run headlong into the MPS because you haven't addressed areas where you may want growth to occur. So each subdivision, the way Andrea and Matt can correct me, but each subdivision will then have to be taken on its own merits as to whether it complies or otherwise with the MPS, rather than identifying an area where growth can occur. So what it will do is put probably a lot more cost and inconvenience on people undertaking subdivision. And the other thing with growth strategy, I mean, I go back to the time when we initiated the current growth strategy that we're working with, which is precincts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The reason council did that was, apart from the fact it was good town planning, was to control the growth of our infrastructure so that we could put infrastructure where it was most cost effective for council, as opposed to reacting to developers and developments and what they wanted. So it was driven by good town planning practices and cost effective growth in our infrastructure. So I don't think you can lose sight that a growth strategy is designed around infrastructure as well. Because what we don't want is disconnected infrastructure. I mean, and there are examples through our district in years gone by where that's occurred. And it comes back to bite you later when expectations of people within developments, they want different things that weren't part of the original development that council gets lobbied for.
So essentially you're saying we're damned if we do and damned if we don't.
If you recall, the growth strategy was not part of the district plan review. It was never perceived that we would do that, because we were of the view that we could develop our rural plan change along the lines of what we wanted. But when the MPS came in, it threw a bit of a spanner in the works. And so, and I remember the conversations with council around what is a way to be able to work our way through that policy document and the growth strategy on advice from, and look, this is untested, but this is a way of navigating through that national policy statement. So that work was introduced as part of the rural plan change, and we put the rural plan challenge in hold while we scoped this out. And so, you know, we're presenting that work back to council now. So what you want to do, entirely up to you, but if you don't proceed with the growth strategy, then we are full on with notifying the rural plan change, but you will have to navigate your way through, you know, future subdivisions without stipulating where that growth may occur. And look, I'll invite comment from either Andrew or Matt, but you know, to me, that actually leads us down quite a dangerous planning path. You know, we've had advice that nodals don't have no legal effect in terms of the MPS. Is that the final advice we got?
So subdivision in the nodal would be subject to the
MPS. That's right. So we wipe out nodals. That's subject to MPS. The growth strategy is a way of incorporating where we want growth around our villages and around fielding, so that we can navigate our way through. That's why we introduced it.
Thank you. So that's given clarity on the whys and the where nots, and it's clear that if we don't do this, the potential cost to developers across the board is going to escalate beyond almost the ridiculous cost that is now faced by people regardless, just because of the law.
Yeah, it'll make it difficult. And look, we don't want to do that. But, you know, I get the Deputy Mayor's point, and it's a valid one. We do have to address our business zones, and we do have to address those others as well. So the sooner we can get this work done, the best. And I will be pushing the team to get this work done as quickly as possible, so we can move into that other work.
So final comment, Your Worship, if I may, is that as we seem to be at a bit of an impasse here, do we include in the recommendations something that gives some degree of credence or satisfaction to the Deputy Mayor's comments? Just a thought.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be satisfied if in the recommendation reference is made to the residential and the business zones being high priority. To me, the greatest risk, I hear what Chief Executive's telling us about the risk of not going ahead with the growth strategy, and I completely agree. Growth strategy is fantastic, but actually the bigger risk is everything's taken off us before we finished it, and it's being done by people in Palmerston and Wanganui and Ruape who know nothing about our district. That's actually a bigger risk for our people than, yeah. So support the growth strategy, support doing the rural zone at the same time, which is, I think we're pretty much all, well, hopefully all agreed on that. I'd just like to see the residential is in on the timeline, but rather disappointingly late from my perspective, and the business is just shunted, and I don't accept that. So if that could be reviewed and looked at, I'd probably be able to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a few questions. Probably I'll start off with you, Shane. Shane, in the past, what did our growth strategy look like? If we didn't have MPS, what did it look like? Because I'm hearing about capacity and resources, and I'm just curious.
So we weren't really constrained by soil types when we undertook that previous growth strategy. What we were driven by was, well, really, to be fair, was driven by the cost of infrastructure. So we had and we still have got our 3 precincts running along West Street, it's 1, 2 and 3. And that was identified through structure plans that to have that as a full residential urban development was very costly in terms of infrastructure, you know, with the hills and the undulations and everything. And so that's why precinct 4 was focused on, because of the nature of the land flat, that's proximity to infrastructure. And then there was precinct 5, which was set aside for the commercial industrial and zone, that which is the Kawakawa block. There were 2 other precincts looked at, one across the river on the other side of the golf club, which is precinct 7, I think, and then the one further down on the other side of AFCO, which was where the Guy farm used to be, which was precinct 6. both of those were not discarded, but weren't progressed because of the cost of infrastructure. So to get infrastructure across the river, get connectivity through roading, it was more difficult and costly than proceeding with precinct 4.
Thank you. Thank you, Shane. I have a question for Councillor Ford. Could you please expand on what you mean by, well, I know, and I know you're sick of this. I'm a newly elected member, and my hearing's a little bit like Grant. So could you please expand on the statement that you make that we'll leave it for other districts to dictate for us what our business zones will be, or similar to that effect that you're talking about? Because I don't actually understand that and that process.
So the current government is reviewing the Resource Management Act and coming up with replacing it with 3 acts. And the bit that I'm particularly concerned about is that district planning, the function that we do here, that we're talking about now, that Matthew leads, will be taken off us. And that will be done by a new regional committee that doesn't exist at the moment. And each council will get one representative on that regional committee, which may be an elected member or it may be a staff member. So it could be you or it could be Matthew or me or anyone else for that matter. So, and that's my fear. I don't support that as being a good way forward. I think that our people can do a much better job of district planning than a regional model. So that's what I'm particularly concerned about. And what we don't know is when, that was my smart aleck question at the beginning, when is it going to be taken off us? We don't know. And so I want to put as much certainty in the system for our community, our people, before it is taken off, before it's all taken off us. Because after that, we have no say. Well, no, sorry, we have one representative on a regional committee. And so I think the best thing that we can do for our people, our community, is to get the rural thing done and dusted, and we're not far away. Residential, there's a heck of a lot of work's been done on that. So while there's still quite a lot to do, but I still think that's very doable. And I've always talked about, because we did review the business zone or zones in 2014, which is not very long ago. Most of that's really good and doesn't need to be changed. So I talk about tweaking it. Now it's a layman's term, and Matthew has explained that some of that's easy to do and some of it's not. I do understand that, but I'm very keen that, but a lot of it's urgent, and part of it is because we've created priority thoroughfares for our earthquake-prone buildings that gives us less than 5 years now. And so part of the solution for these people who have this looming problem is that some of the changes that we're talking about making to the district plan, and it's not even on the work program, and that's why I'm getting a little bit tetchy. Yeah.
Shane.
So as a suggestion, we have got those current recommendations 1, 2, 3. There we insert a 4th recommendation that says that council continue the district plan review of the business and residential zones. Would that do it?
Yeah, I'm pretty easily pleased.
And change the work program.
Well, that
Timelines.
would automatically happen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just give the team a minute to get that wording for that additional recommendation. Yeah, Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I just a follow-up question for Councillor Ford actually, and on the business plan, you've expressed concern around the earthquake-prone buildings. Is that the essence of your concern for the business plan, or is it more to that?
No, part of the, I'll give you one example, say, if you've got a 2-storey unreinforced masonry building in the town centre, we have a lot of them. At the moment, there's very little use made of upper floors. In most cases, it's storage or just nothing. Now, if a building owner was looking to maybe strengthen their building part of the viability of that, one of the ways to make it viable would be to put apartments in on the upper floors. At the moment, you can put one per property, one per title. Now that's fine, but so that's one example. Somebody could put in 2 or 3 without having to go for resource consent. So that's one example of here's a solution to here's a possible way forward to address the earthquake-prone building issue.
Right.
So I'm more interested in the solutions rather than it being just about the time frame of earthquake-prone buildings.
Yeah.
We put forward a remit which sort of more addressed that issue.
Yeah.
But we're now talking about other planning measures. Some of them relate to earthquake-prone buildings. Some of the other measures don't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And this is just for the benefit of the Deputy Mayor, but I'm wondering on recommendation 4, whether or not the word continue be replaced by expedite might find some favour with the Deputy Mayor.
So we have put up the amended recommendations.
Thank you. So maybe we'll go through these one at a time and use the wording on the screen as our updated wording. So the first one is, and I'm happy to move that we accept a new Manawatu growth strategy will be prepared to plan for growth within the district for the next 30 years. This will include growth options for Fielding and the villages. So I've moved it. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hadfield. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried.
I'll do after.
Thank you. So those you're not adding any extra words. Okay. So recommendation 2, if I could have a mover and a seconder, please.
Happy to. So move that the costs of preparing a Manawatu growth strategy will be funded from the district plan review, rolling review project.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McFadyen. Any further comment? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Recommendation 3. Councillor Hadfield.
Yep, happy to move that the council completes work on the draft rural and flood hazard review for draft consultation this year, alongside the growth strategy. I would have quite liked to have put a time constraint in there, but if my colleagues are happy with it, I'm happy to run with it.
Thank you. So that's moved, seconded.
Yes,
Councillor Ford.
happy to second it.
Thank you. No further discussion. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. And recommendation number 4. I'll give you the honour of doing that one. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that council continue the district plan review of the business and residential zones.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hadfield. No further discussion. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Right.
There's
So
5, 6 and 7.
yes, so now that we have adopted those recommendations, we have 5, 6 and 7, which looking at those, I believe could be done as 5, 6 and 7. Do we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ford.
I move that 5, that council receives the updated strategic planning program 2023. 6, that a review of funding for council's strategic planning program, including the district plan review project, will be required as part of the 2024 to 2034 long-term plan. And 7, that the work program will need to be adjusted as additional information is released on Resource Management Act reform timeframes.
Thank you. Councillor Short, seconded. Any further discussion? Councillor Underwood.
Recommendation 4 had to be included in recommendation 5, the strategic planning program. Did we want to say that
You're talking about the residential and business being included in the work program.
Because at the moment it's not, but we are receiving it. Although updated means currently updated, or that it's going to be updated further.
It will automatically now be updated that you have accepted that previous resolution. So that automatically brings it back into the work program. So I don't think we need to play around with it. It will just have to happen.
Thank you.
Now that we've had that resolution.
Yeah, so our recommendation 4 covers that is now included.
Yep.
Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Just, I suppose in light of the addition of recommendation 4 and the comments around resourcing, we've not actually addressed that. Do we need to?
We will have to look at that as part of that district plan review. We will come back to council.
Okay, thank you.
So my understanding is that will be included under resolutions, recommendation 6. Okay. Thank you. Now I get back to where I was. We had a mover and a seconder. Is that correct, Steph? Thank you. No further discussion. I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Those recommendations are passed. Thank you. Carried. Yes, thank you. Good discussion. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Lynn. We understand it is challenging and we are doing, yeah, we think we've got there and then suddenly the rules change. So thank you. Right, let's adjourn now for morning tea, and if we could welcome back. Let us reconvene our meeting, and we are on item 11.2, page 37. This is the adoption of the 2023-24 annual plan. And welcome to the team, Amanda, Lisa and Francis.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. So this is an important milestone for our council, and it does represent a significant amount of work right across the teams of the council. So infrastructure, community, regulatory, finance, comms, strategy, and of course, governance. And I'll hand over to Lisa for the opening remarks, but also just to note that the two following items, the rates resolution and the debt resolution, are closely related to this item.
Good morning, Your Worship, councillors, colleagues. Lovely to be here today. So as Francis has introduced, we're here to adopt the annual plan for the 23-24 year. The annual plan is year 3 of the 2021 to 31 long-term plan. Council is required by section 95 of the Local Government Act 2002 to prepare the annual plan for each financial year and to adopt that plan before the commencement of the year to which it relates, i.e. before the 1st of July 2023. Section 3 of the report sets out the rates requirement for the 2023-24 year and the factors that have contributed to that. This annual plan is largely a business as usual plan. The total rates increase for 23-24 for existing ratepayers is 6.94%, which is 8.44% minus 1.5% growth. And the main factors contributing to the rates requirement include depreciation, interest rate increases, and deliberations outcomes. The internal and external requests that were approved for the annual plan are detailed in the annual plan document that's attached to the report. As noted in section 5 of the report, none of these variations were considered to be significant in terms of Council's significance and engagement policy. Council therefore decided at the 15th of December workshop in 2022 not to consult on the draft annual plan. As outlined in paragraph 5.3 of the report, following the adoption of the annual plan, Council will implement its communications plan, including sending letters to those members of the community who applied for funding through the annual plan process. In terms of the recommendations, recommendation 1 is to adopt the annual plan. The second recommendation authorises the Chief Executive to approve any final edits required to finalise the document should any be required.
Thanks. Thank you, Lisa. Open it up for questions, comments. Councillor Underwood.
In 10.3, the reference in the last line of that paragraph to paragraph 5.4 that's supposed to tell us how you're going to go about communicating, and just notice that 5.4 was absent.
Yes, I had crossed that out of my report when I read it just the other day, actually. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that. It was from an earlier version of the report where I had actually listed all of those communication methods, but was just taken out for, to keep the report as short as possible. But all of those were detailed in a workshop presentation, so we can access, and I can give you that list. Yeah, it was discussed at a previous workshop by Rhea, I think.
That's right. Yes, we did go through that.
Could I just clarify, was one of those through the Facebook page?
Yes, it was.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Quarry.
Thank you. Just remind me on the rating impact with regard to depreciation. I know we've parked the depreciation. What's going to happen next year, and how's that going to affect the rates?
Sure. So we've parked a portion of the depreciation, not all of it. So in the LTP, we had an assumption around revaluation increases. And what's actually happened is that the revaluation increases that came through in the recent revaluation were higher than our expected. So we parked the difference, which is around 4 mil, of which a portion is NZTA funded. So the amount that was for us is what we've parked. When you did that, when you had that kind of conversation, we talked about the fact that this is a particularly high period in time of revaluations, and we're expecting that the market will soften and come back down. So the discussion, the main kind of discussion that we had at the time was to leave that as unfunded and revisit it in the LTP. It may be that you do need to lift the rates and the funding, or it may be that during the LTP process, you may look at how we fund depreciation. So you may choose to fund less depreciation in particular areas. So as you recall, we fund only high priority halls, not the low priority halls. We fund 50% of 50% of parks and reserves, and there's an assumption around there that there's third party funding, that kind of thing. It may be that during the LTP, you revisit some of those and think, we've got some other things we want to tweak. But it is possible that if the market carries on increasing and the value of assets do increase, you may have a spike going forward. That is one of the risks.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, perhaps I could follow on from those comments around the effect of depreciation and refer councillors to page 87 of the papers, which is the prospective statement of revenue expenses, and I think that explains it quite well. If you look at those numbers, the fact is we're budgeting for an operating deficit of $4 million this year, which is, as Amanda has said, is half of the increase in depreciation. The depreciation has gone up about $8 million, so we're only funding half of that through an increase in rates. Okay, so that could have an effect next year. So it's an important question, Councillor Quarry, that could have ongoing implications if depreciation stays at the same rate. So perhaps if I could just continue with a few other comments around the annual plan as a whole. I think, in my opinion, that what we're presenting and what we're putting out in terms of our budgets and rate rise is reflective of the current economic conditions that we're now in. I think the golden run that we've had the last few years with low interest rates is well and truly over, and that's going to restrict our ability to spend for the benefit of community, or benefit of the community really. So in some ways we've run out of money. I was going to say we're running out of money. We haven't quite run out of money yet, but we are going to be restrained in terms of what we can do. And the report notes the delay in the construction of Turners Road, which is quite a critical project for us, and unfortunately that's now delayed. And also the wastewater centralisation project, which has been underway for some time, and we're not able to finish it in the time frame that we were hoping to do. So that's an example of, things are tougher now. And it's highlighted particularly again on page 87 by the increase in finance costs, which you'll note have more than doubled. We've spent 1.896 million in the 23 year, and we're projecting 3.8 million, so double, significant amount of money. And also looking through that page, we should note that staffing costs are only projected to go up 5%. That's less than inflation. But I think we've done well to put out a rate rise of 6.94%, which is slightly below inflation. So I think we've done the right thing there. So I just ask, as we adopt this annual plan, and that council staff go about implementing it within the budgets that they've been given within this, that they keep the current economic conditions in mind. The fact that, and I'm seeing it through my work, that business profits are down this year. Consumer spending is under pressure. Everybody in the community is going to find, and all of us know this, the price of groceries has gone up. There's just not as much money around to be able to pay bills, and rates is one of those big bills that people get. So I would just ask council staff, as they go about their work and utilising their budget, to keep those factors in mind, and mirror their spending habits with the pressures that the community are facing as well. Just because if we want to spend more, we can go and rate it. That's not a good strategy to have at the moment. So I think this is a good plan, an appropriate annual plan. I want to thank everyone for their work and putting it together, including us around the table here, but everybody that's had input. It hasn't been an easy job to balance the books this year. But yeah, I think it's a good plan, and thank you, everyone. I'm happy to support it being adopted.
Thank you for those comments. Any further discussion, questions? Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Support Councillor Campbell. I think it is 6.94%, higher than I would have liked it. I feel somewhat uncomfortable. However, taking everything into account and inflation and what's happened, I think it's a responsible level. And so, yeah, I think we've done the best we can on behalf of our community. We're tightening our belts where we can, but we're also getting on with business as usual, doing what we need to do. So very happy to support this annual plan.
Thank you, Councillor Underwood.
Thank you. If I could just ask a question around the rates. I noticed that high value properties within Fielding have gone up 20%, which has amounted to $1,000. Who sets the conditions around the rates rebate? Is that central government or local government?
So when you're talking about rates rebate, you're talking about I'm thinking the low income rebate that people get. That is central government. We help people, we submit the forms for them and help them fill in the forms and that kind of thing. But it's actually, I think it's DIA actually. It's a local government entity. So we help them to do it, but we don't set the income threshold or anything like that.
Has there been any talk of the income threshold being adjusted? No?
I'm not aware of it, but possible. I'm not aware of it.
I'm just thinking of, people in Fielding who may be now retired, who are in the family home, and it is, very expensive home, but it's, their income is severely reduced. Yeah.
Councillor Ford.
Just on that, there was a remit at the Zone 3 meeting that was put forward, and I'm pretty sure it was passed to look at, I think it was inflation adjusting the limit for the rates rebate, and also looking at the total amount. So, but it's, I think we're talking $700 or $800. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Yeah. At the moment, so it's. Yeah, it's a help, but it's still a relatively minor help for those on paying $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 in rates. So yes, there is a remit that may go forward to the annual general meeting of Local Government New Zealand to get them to lobby to have that changed.
Councillor Short.
Thank you. I think there's been remits in the past as well to LGNZ AGM. I believe the response was that DIA used the superannuation payments, what people are entitled, the entitlement is the benchmark that they use to how much, at what level someone can apply. So it is to do with superannuation, I think, and other benefits. So
it's quite possible. To be fair, I have not looked. I just know it's a number.
I'm sure we heard it discussed at a local government. And so that's, and I do agree that it needs to be a lot more than that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. I concur with the other comments. I think the other thing to understand, of course, is that we maintain the momentum of going forward. And it's quite easy to sit here and say we should slash and burn, but it's not just the effect of that, it's the effect that when we come out of these tight times, then that we would not be well positioned to go forward. And I think this will maintain our business as usual to the best environment that we can at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Good points. Thank you. So, Councillor Campbell, would you like to, Councillor Belsky?
Yeah, reading through the annual plan, it's to me, it's very explains a lot. It's really good to go out to the public. But I was just a query here on page 170, number 8. We are interested in understanding. This is to do with the tobacco regime, regulatory regime. We are interested in understanding the needs of different areas of Aotearoa, and I think it should be areas of New Zealand. The registered name of our country is just
Excuse me, councillor Belsky, I'm not sure that we're on the same agenda item. I think you're talking about our submissions to government.
Oh, yeah. On to that.
We're-
Sorry, I've gone too far ahead.
Yeah, we're on
But-
page 37.
But reading through the explanations of the plan, it's very good.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Yes, happy to move that in accordance with section 95 of the Local Government Act 2002, the council adopts the annual plan 2023-24 and that the chief executive be authorised to approve any final edits required to the draft annual plan 23-24 in order to finalise the document.
Thank you. Seconded by councillor Ford. Any further discussion? Put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motions are carried. Thank you. And I also want to pass on my thanks and endorse what councillor Campbell said, the work that's gone into this and the discussion that we've had. It is a hard balancing act to be responsible, but also be able to create the environment that we need for the future. So thank you to all concerned. So we're on item 11.3. We're on page 99. This is the adoption of the rates resolution.
Right. Okay, thank you. So this is the adoption of the rates resolution. It is the formal, this is a really, really important resolution. This actually allows us to rate our rates. Therefore, because it is so important, it has been through a legal review from a Simpson Gerson, which is the rating specialist that we use in the country. Like every word is checked and that kind of thing. The only change that's actually happened from last year to this year is updating the numbers. There's a couple of apostrophes and minor things, but actually we had a pretty robust resolution. Happy to take any questions on it. We don't normally read it all out when you move it, just in case the newbie's like, oh, I'm not going to move this. You don't have to read it out. But happy to take any questions.
And given that it's been through full legal review, I would be very apprehensive in changing anything.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Underwood.
Sorry, you may have said that, but I didn't quite catch. The legal review, do all local governments use the same company?
Probably not all. Simpson Gerson are held as across our sector as being specialists. Like we wouldn't just go to any lawyer. We go to somebody who actually knows the Local Government Act and the Rating Act. And there probably are others, but that is the one that we kind of go to.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. So if there's nothing further, we have the recommendation on page 99. I don't expect you to read the full amount apart from the first sentence. Thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I'm happy to move the adoption of rates resolution for the 2023-24 financial year that Manawatu District Council, in pursuance of the exercise powers conferred on it by the Local Government Rating Act 2002 and any other empowering provisions, resolves to set the following rates on rating units in the district for the financial year commencing 1 July 2023 and ending 30th of June 2024. All rates and amounts expressed as inclusive of goods and services tax.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you. So that allows us to collect the rates. So the next part in this process is the adoption of the debt resolution, confirming the ability to raise the debt as set out in our annual plan, and we're on page 108.
So very briefly across here, we do a couple of parts when it comes to debt. We have the new drawdown for our new debt for the year. We have our repayments. We don't need approval to repay. So the resolution only covers what we're going to draw as new, but we repay on average around $3.5 to $3.6 million every year of any of our debt. Of course, as our debt goes up, our repayments go up. So it's about 3.5 right now. This next year, the year that we're talking about, 23-24, originally in the LTP had the $1.4 million debt drawdown for Manawatu Community Trust. Of course, that's now gone into this current financial year. So that's the main change from what we were expecting to do. What else have we got? The values that also what happens during the year is we have rolling refinancing of papers. So as you're aware, we use an external entity, Bancorp Treasury Services, who give us advice around how long we should put our debt down. Should we be using fixed? Should be using floating? That kind of thing. So based on their recommendations, some of our debt is fixed and some of our debt is floating. So depending on how much is when as to how much comes up for renewals. And that just is part of BAU when we do the refinancing. So this particular recommendation is just solely around the new debt. I have not yet borrowed up to the full amount of any of the resolutions, because that would mean that we spend absolutely every part of our CapEx budget. And as you know, we don't ever kind of get there. We've got up to 80% odd. But we might not spend it in this year that we're getting the approvals for. But if we don't, it will flow forward into the next year and as a carry forward. So the approval flows forward as well. So yeah. Happy to take any questions. I think it's fairly straightforward, but this is the first time that quite a few of you have seen a debt resolution. So, the other thing you may have thought about or seen through there is we talk about a debt cap, which we've talked about a couple of times. That is, there's four criteria around what a debt cap gets measured against. And that's based off the local government funding agency's lending covenants. We actually stick to those, and there's four of them. The one that applies to us, because what it says is you do each of the measures, and the one that is the tightest, you could say, is the one that we measured off. And that one is that our borrowing is less than 175% of our revenue. So it caps, so your revenue goes up, to your potential to borrow goes up. We've then put in a self-imposed debt cap, which is through our financial strategy, that says that we will borrow 5 mil less than that debt cap at any time. And that's recognising that if we hit an event, we have that emergency kind of ability to flex up. So that's kind of one of our resilience things that we keep in our back pocket. Of course, if we don't borrow it, of course, we don't pay for it. We also have a $10 million facility, a bit like an overdraft at our main banking provider, which is BNZ. In the past, we've used that for a month or two, depending on where we're at and when our rates come in. We haven't used that in recent years, but it is a requirement for us to keep our liquidity, is to have that on the back burner. That's probably the main things I thought I'd bring you up to.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Underwood.
Several questions, sorry. I didn't quite catch again, sorry. You talk a little bit fast for me sometimes.
Okay.
Did I hear you say Treasury Services?
Yes.
And they are, you referred to them as an initialism? What?
It's Bancorp Treasury Services. Bancorp. So there's Treasury
Bancorp.
Services. So there's kind of two players in local government. There's PwC, PricewaterhouseCooper, and there's Bancorp. PwC.
Thank you.
PricewaterhouseCooper.
Oh, yeah.
Two entities. Yeah. And we use Bancorp.
And they're the ones that have given advice about whether to be fixed or.
Yes.
And
So
I know,
they also present a report as part of our quarterly reporting, which comes through to audit and risk and then up to council. There's a Treasury dashboard report that outlines what our borrowing is, where we're sitting against our KPIs and against our measures for our liability management policy and that kind of thing. So they actually provide a quarterly report as well. And I'm always happy to come and talk.
no, that's fine. 3.2, it makes reference to the Bank of New Zealand. Does that indicate that you'll be getting some of this money from them, or is it coming from the local government funding?
So 3.2 refers to, we have a $10 million loan facility with BNZ, which is our banking provider. Kind of have in your head, that's an overdraft facility. We can draw it as we need it. I have to have some paperwork to do, but in essence, that's an overdraft facility if we need it. When we do our long-term borrowing, we use local government funding agency. there isn't a bank that gives us the rates that we get from them. So,
but is it true that they limit what you can spend the money on?
no,
Like you can't spend it on infrastructure or anything like that?
no, absolutely not.
No, there's no
no limit.
Right.
Their limit is that you have your financial covenants. You know, you're not borrowing too much based on your rates, your interest, that kind of thing.
And this $11.5 million, it says it's for, capital projects in the long-term plan. Are they the ones that are listed on pages 6? Was it pages 6 to 10? Sorry, I can't quite see where I've written it down. Oh, yeah, there's some on pages 8 to 12, and then there's others on pages 13 to 15. Are those the capital projects that we're referring to?
So some of them will be, but the capital projects that we borrow for is new CapEx work only, predominantly. There's a couple of scenarios on that. So of course, if you've got a CapEx project that's a renewal, then that's funded from your depreciation reserve. So when you look at your CapEx, you've got 3 classifications: new stuff, new levels of service, new infrastructure, your renewals, which is replenishing the existing stuff, and then you've got growth related works. So we borrow to fund new, unless there's third party funding, and on some of our new stuff we do get third party funding. So obviously debt and rates are always our last option. So we borrow for new capital work, something we don't already have. We also borrow to fund some of our growth works where we're doing the growth in advance, and the development contribution money coming in isn't coming in as fast as we're doing the works, because we can't put in a metre of pipe because we've got the money, we put in a length of pipe kind of thing. So it's very much a forward program. So the development contributions come in to pay for the work, but also any interest costs incurred on the debt. So we borrow mainly for 2 things.
Thank you. Just one more question. Recommendation 4, that the borrowing be secured by a debenture trust deed over all rates made from time to time. Could you just explain a little more about that? It's like the ratepayer is standing as guarantor for this loan, is that right?
In essence, the security, like if you're a normal person, your security will be over your house, that kind of thing. Ours is over the fact that we have the ability to rate. So it's actually on the ability to rate. It's like the mortgage, but it's actually on the rates, future rates income, not on our buildings as such.
Right. So, and the ability to rate above and beyond those 4 installments each year? No. So what they'd say, worst case scenario, something happened, they'd come in and say, we recognise that you can repay your debt because next year you'll have to set your rates higher to repay the debt. So you can't rate more than what your resolution says, but it recognises that council has the ability to repay debt because we can rate in the future to repay. Is it made public the fact that like council will now have over $100 million in debt that is secured by the ratepayer?
I'm not sure if it specifically shows it anywhere. It does in our management liability policy, which is on our website. In fact, I think it's in the LTP, I'm not quite sure. The level of debt that we have is certainly published, and it's in our balance sheet. It's in our rates resolution here, which is public as well. We definitely don't broadcast and say, hey, by the way, but it is there. It is there.
But is it made known to the ratepayer that they're the ones who are securing it?
Well, technically they're securing everything in the future, because it is the community that funds all these community assets that we're doing. Yeah.
It's just my concern that everything I'm hearing, at the moment from New Zealand and overseas is reduce your debt, reduce your debt.
Absolutely.
And we seem to be increasing it, and LGFA are making it possible for us to increase it further.
So you need to look at in our financial strategy, the reason why we use debt. And so the reason why we use debt is to spread the cost across multiple generations. So from a person who may not be aware of our challenges of making sure that multiple generations pay for a wastewater treatment plant, their concept is debt's a bad thing. But from our concept, debt is a way of spreading the cost so that one generation doesn't pay for everything. So I suppose it's about knowledge and about where you are in that knowledge thing. From an external person, you're going, oh my gosh, there's a lot of debt. But from us, we're saying there's an ability to spread costs, and that's an easy way of doing it, or a good way of doing it. It's an education process, I suppose.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I guess, Councillor Underwood, another way of looking at it would be to think of it that these are public funds that we, as the council, is managing on behalf of the public and in general. So we're spending and borrowing on behalf of the people of the Manawatu district. So it's those people are securing the debt. You're dead right. So yeah, we do. It is something we need to think about when we. And of course, the other thing is with a projected $105 million worth of debt at a repayment rate of $3.5 million a year. That's a 30-year term over everything we've got. So it's probably more likely that Councillor Bell will be present when the last payment is made than me. So yeah, it's long-term funding we've borrowed, and we're not paying it off particularly quickly. But we have got the benefit of a pretty modern wastewater treatment plant because of it, which is where most of the money went, and a few other assets. So,
Councillor Underwood.
But I'm also aware that, $2 million in increased financing costs went into putting the rates up as well, and we've got no real control over that, only just advice from Treasury Services. And I don't know if there's any danger of, the whole debt being called in at any stage.
Absolutely not. No.
But I mean, anything can happen.
The local government funding agencies' bread and butter is to loan money and get interest in.
To councils.
So that they're not in danger of calling in any debt.
Yeah, but I tried to look in how they raise their money. They sell bonds, is that right?
Oh, they've got various ways. I mean, the reason for the local government funding agency being put up was it allowed an entity to be able to source money through multiple ways, and also offshore. Local governments were very constrained with how we could access some of that finance. So that was the reason for the LGFA being put in place. And it's also it's a portion of underwriting from the government with LGFA.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah. Part of my concern was the offshore and who's buying the bonds and who's underwriting this money.
A whole lot of people way clearer than me.
Yeah, but I can't find any list of it,
That's secret.
Are we able to access that information? Because I think
we've got all those documents. We've got all those debentures and all of those documents.
Yeah, I just wanted to know who's underwriting the loans, because most companies will have that on their website and let you know who's underwriting their loans, but I couldn't find anything. So if you could find something for me, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure, Manny can dig some stuff.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Short.
Thank you. And I think for the new councillors, it all is laid out clearly in the Rating Act, isn't it? How we can do these things, what we can and cannot do. 100 million sounds a very large figure, but what's the current value of our district?
It's got lots of numbers. It's actually in the annual plan on the page under rating.
So I mean, as an example,
It's got
if you had a property worth $1 million, I mean, and you had a mortgage for $100,000, it's actually not as big an implication what it sounds.
We'll be up to 1 billion in assets.
Yeah, it's
which isn't relevant when it comes to us borrowing money, because we don't operate on a debt equity ratio. We operate on.
I just think it helps the general public understand, when they hear that we've got $100 million debt, they're getting a bit of a panic, because in most cases they do realise they're responsible for paying it. But if you put it in a bigger picture of what the value of our assets is, it does soften that message.
It's about 10% of assets, which is the same ratio we've kept now for quite a long time, or most of the last 10 years, I suppose. So, and that proportion hasn't really changed, has it?
Not really.
It's maybe gone up slightly, but
interest goes up, revaluation goes up.
It's around, we've maintained around about 9 or 10% of debt to assets.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the big difference for Councillor Underwood is here, my understanding is that when you borrow against your house, of course, your borrower has security over your house. When the council borrows money, there's no real security that they can call up. They hardly can go and pick a pipeline up out of the road and resell it. So the only way that they can actually secure the money is actually secured against future income, which is the rates. So in terms of exposure, I can hardly see that they would call it in, because who's going to buy it? Who's going to buy all the pipelines sitting and all that infrastructure spread all around the district? So there's not a great risk in terms of for the community as I see it, but understanding that it's secured against future revenue, and that's the only way I see that they can fund it.
Councillor Belsky.
Yeah, I am concerned of the debt level, but at the same time, I'm very thankful for what the infrastructure we have. Martin Borough evidently has to stop all new builds for 2 years because their wastewater can't handle any more new residents. So we, through our infrastructure of our wastewater and drinking water, we're way ahead. And so there are either two debts. There are either debt like this or debt with things not done. And but we certainly need to be prudent in the future and get value for our buck, for our money. But I would be happy to recommend this, even though I'm against a lot of new debt, but the infrastructure is needed to continue our growth. And so I'm prepared to move.
Thank you.
The recommendation, if everyone's finished.
Thank you, Councillor Belsky.
This is on page 108, isn't it?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. That the council authorise the chief executive to borrow new loans up to $11,470,000 to fund the capital projects identified in the annual plan 2023-24. That the council authorises the chief executive to borrow to refinance existing loan facilities as they fall due. Loans can only be refinanced within the terms of the original loan approval. Number 3, that the council authorises the chief executive to negotiate and agree the terms, interest rate payable, type of loan facilities, or issues of stock that make up the borrowing, and to execute any agreements, documents, and certificates in respect to such loans, facilities, or stock on behalf of the council. 4, that the borrowing be secured by a debenture trust deed over all rates made from time to time by council under the Local Government in brackets Rating Act 2002.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Blackmore. No further discussion. I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motions are carried. Thank you. Thanks, team. And like you say, really good to be in this space now and have that confirmed and go forward. So 11.5, we're on page 111. This is the Manawatu Community Trust's remuneration. And this is to consider the remuneration that is paid to the trust for the next financial year. Welcome, Marie and Lynn.
So yes, this is the annual Manawatu Community Trust Remuneration Review. This year we got a new report from Strategic Pay. It's been 3 years since the previous one, just to get a gauge of the market. And Strategic Pay recommend the same pool as there was in 2020. But they do recommend a larger percentage increase for the chair, which is detailed in 3.2, increasing from a 1 to 1.39 ratio to a 1 to 1.5. And I think the report is pretty straightforward, but take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Look, my experience with strategic pay over a number of years is that they are always pretty bang on and do a pretty good job. There's nothing on this report that actually I can't see. There's nothing on this report not to support the recommendations that are put forward. I'm certainly, from my past experience, happy with the work that strategic pay have done, and I think it's just a matter of meeting the market. So pretty straightforward, really. I'm happy to recommend, which is pretty simple, really. But so I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment, especially for newer councillors. This is the only CCO that we do remunerate the trustees. It has a revenue component of in excess of $5 million per annum. And the asset value, what would that be up to now? 30, 35? I saw in the report that in the strategic pay report, it sits in the bracket of owning assets of 20 to 50 million. So that's, of course, over 200 housing units plus the Fielding Healthcare Centre building. So yes, I certainly support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hadfield. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. I'm just curious as to whether in this review, are you satisfied that given the move to develop as a chip, the board and the team are navigating probably some quite complex landscape there, and as that's set up and then moves on, development of houses, are you satisfied that that's been taken into consideration for the responsibilities?
Thank you. Yes, that might be something as part of the next triennium that we look, and it might have an impact on the remuneration at that stage, but now it's satisfactory. And can I just make another point? We do also remunerate CEDA, which is also a CCO. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Happy to move. One, that the annual remuneration pool payable to the Manawatu Community Trustees for the period 1 July 23 to 30 June 24 be set at a maximum of $113,600 per annum and allocated to the trustees as determined by resolution of the trust board. And two, to award a larger percentage increase to the chair from 1 to 1.39 ratio between the trustees to the chair to 1.1 to 1.5.
Thank you. I have a seconder for that motion, Councillor Short. Thank you. No further discussion. I put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motions are carried. Thank you. So we move to 11.6 and we're on page 129. This is to formally receive the submissions that have been lodged on behalf of council on the various topics to the government submission process, and outlining there the 10 most recent ones that have been done. So they're there for our information, but also to formally adopt. And it is important that we share this information with the community so that they know the amount of work that we are doing on behalf of the community to have input into these future legislative processes. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Your Worship, councillors. So as me, Helen has mentioned, this report is to table submissions recently lodged on behalf of council. So 9 submissions were lodged during the period from the 23rd of February to the 28th of April this year. I'm happy to sort of, discuss any of those in detail. The majority were lodged in the Mayor's name, but there were a couple in there that relate to more regulatory functions and things of council. So those were lodged in the name of Shane, our Chief Executive. Since this report, there's been another submission lodged, so that will be brought to you next report, which is on the Charging Our Future strategy, which is Ministry of Transport one. And there are also several submissions at the moment being drafted. And I've got a list of those for anyone that's interested. All of these submissions went through our submissions assessment panel for feedback and have been sort of approved for lodgement by that panel. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Right, so any questions, comments? Councillor Short.
Just a comment, really. Thank you very much for all the work that you and in some cases Kenny does. It's I don't know how you sleep at night with all these deadlines looming in front of you. I'd just like to comment that when you go to regional get-togethers with councils, our assessment panel nails this compared to some of the slow and cumbersome methods some other councils are doing it. And having a mixture of staff and governance members really makes a huge difference. And I commend everyone involved.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Look, I support Councillor Short's comments. Bit of work goes into this, and Lisa and everybody else do a fantastic job on throwing this in, and I still think that's something that we do very well on behalf of the community. But the only other thing I'd say is that actually we should really take this as read. All the information's in the report. And on that basis, I'm happy to move the recommendation, Your Worship. But actually don't really want to read it all out. So
the first sentence can do.
If you want me to read it all out, I might have to go to Specsavers.
The first sentence would be fine.
Right. Thanks, Your Worship. So I'm happy to move that the council receives and notes the following submissions lodged on behalf of the Manawatu District Council between the 23rd of February 23 and the 28th of April 2023 as listed.
As listed. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Bell. No further discussion. Councillor Quarry.
Is there any feedback on these submissions?
Generally not. We do obviously keep an eye on when particularly new legislation, once that's adopted, to sort of see how that compares to what we requested. Yeah, I guess some of these, legislation will fall out of it, or regulations that come out. So yeah, there are on the individual websites of the ministries and things that are running the consultations, they do have summaries of submissions received, and they also publish the final versions of any reports or regulations that flow out. But yeah, generally it's just kind of us keeping an eye on how things progress.
Yeah, hence the problem, isn't it?
Well, I think, Councillor Quarry, I think the drongos in Wellington don't know when they're receiving good advice.
Any advice? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Ford.
But those on the submissions committee feel a whole lot better getting it off their chest. That's the main benefit, I think. So, all I really want to do is sincerely thank everybody involved, staff members and the elected members on the committee. So I do understand that it's a pretty onerous job. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Can I also ask that we do some comms around this work? I know, from the wording around this it's like, so what, but I think the message is really important that we are on behalf of our community participating in the process to help hopefully get the right outcome for our community. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make, Your Worship, and as you'll be aware, I actually update my community committees on the submissions that we've made as they've come before council. I think you're probably Glen or Takaria when we did that, and it's actually quite interesting because at that meeting, the community were actually quite appreciative of the fact that actually we're actually doing it. I think Councillor Quarry's point that nobody may take any notice is not the point. The community knows that we're actually doing our best for them.
Thank you. Councillor Quarry.
The other point on that is that there's these are the ones that have been responded to. There's an awful lot that aren't responded to, but still require an enormous amount of work to analyse.
Thank you.
I think the submissions panel picks out the ones that
Yeah.
have a direct impact on the community. I think that's the idea. Isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you. And I guess the good point there to include in our comms to the public is that these are the ones, due to the time constraints and the sheer number that we're expected to deal with, these are the ones that we believe have the biggest impact on our community. Right, thank you. Let's go to 11.7. We're on page 193. This is the granting of exemptions for our council-controlled organisations.
Thank you. Yes, as Mayor Helen said, for our exemptions. So we're seeking exemption for our 8 smaller council-controlled organisations from being a CCO in accordance with the Local Government Act for a further 3-year period. And what that means is that there's no statutory requirement for them to have a statement of intent, and neither for their monitoring and reporting. And just to note that Cedar and Manawatu Community Trust are not small CCOs and not seeking exemption for them. Open to any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
Yeah, sorry, that was going to be one of my questions. You said Cedar and
Manawatu Community Trust
we're
are
not small,
we're
and
not,
therefore we're not going to
we're not seeking
an
exemption.
injection.
Yeah.
So 2 questions. If there's no statement of intent, how do we measure performance? And also the reporting requirements, I assume they do report still, but not, it's not legislated, so they do an annual report still. I think I've seen the annual reports coming through.
Yes, they report to us 6 monthly.
6
and
monthly.
12 monthly. Yeah, so twice a year. And for instance, Arahuri Forest Kitchener Park, for instance, have a strategic plan that we agree to, and Fielding Civic Centre Trust is working through one as well. But they do not have to abide by, because if we grant them exemption, then we don't have to do the statement of expectations, statement of intent, and then they don't need to be formally audited, which is costly.
Yes, so it's mainly the audit you're trying to avoid. Is that why they have exemptions? Because of their small nature, the audit is a big cost.
Yes, and the Local Government Act, and sets out this exemption so that they don't have to be audited and have the cost of that audit.
Thank you.
Sorry, just the measurement of performance. It's just they say what they've done, and you decide whether it meets your expectations.
Yes, and we are, as you know, doing a review of one of those CCOs at the moment.
Thank you.
So just to follow on from that, so some of these are regional groups. So each of the councils who are members of these groups have to go through this process.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Just checking, I see Camp Ringy Woods Trust is there. I thought we'd withdrawn our membership with Camp Ringy Woods Trust.
So there is a resolution on council books for us to withdraw from that trust. It's proving to be just a little bit tricky.
So we haven't actually done that yet.
So it's likely I'll be bringing a paper to the next council meeting asking for me to be appointed as a trustee, so that we then have a trust who's able to enact the requirements of the trustee, because no one's been appointed, so we haven't got any trustees. So working through that, I am with the YMCA and those that are currently acting in the capacity of trustees.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, there's certainly advantages to granting exemptions from accounting point of view and audit point of view. We don't have to consolidate these entities into the council end of year report. So that's a benefit. And I can understand most of these ones here. Camp Rangi Woods turnover is really small. We don't have much to do with it. And some of these entities aren't trading. So like Heartland Contractors, I think the Ahakia Visitor Centre is another one. But likes of the Civic Centre and Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park, they're not all that small. They turn over a bit of money. Are we able, I just wonder how we're able to apply for an exemption for them. I would have thought they might have been a bit big.
Yes, they do meet the test for an exemption.
Right. So
and it's the same as, this is a standard paper that has been going to council for each triennium for a number of years now.
Yeah, so just looking at the terms in 7.5 of the Local Government Act that you refer to, the matters are the nature and scope of activities provided by the organisation, the cost and benefits to the local authority if the exemption is granted. I mean, they're fairly subjective conditions there. So if we're able to apply those, well, we might as well save a bit of money. Support.
It also saves a lot of paperwork, which is needless really, which is being achieved through a strategic plan and reporting to council anyway. So,
Councillor Short.
Thank you. With the Civic Centre in Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park, personally, I've always believed those trustees should be remunerated. If we did put in place in the future an honoraria for those, would those two organisations still meet the exemption criteria, or is the fact that they then had remunerated trustees put them in a different bracket?
It's my understanding it wouldn't make a difference to the exemption.
No. Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Blackmore.
Probably just a comment, and I might be incorrect. I'm happy to be challenged. I think we just need to also think the fact that most of these are volunteers, and so keep it as simple as possible for our volunteers, particularly because it's actually quite hard to recruit more people onto these boards. So, and on the performance question from Councillor Underwood, do these all report to council?
Fielding Civic Centre does, Awahuri Forest doesn't. As Stuart mentioned, that some of these are actually not operating at the moment. MWLS, we don't have a report to council for that. That is operating. And Mayor Helen provides an update on the Manawatu District Youth Development and Wellbeing Trust as required.
I suppose there are just, if we have concerns about performance, there is an avenue to actually ask those questions.
Thank you. Anything further? Otherwise, we'll go to those recommendations on page 193. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Campbell.
Do you want me to read it all?
No, we can.
I'll just say the council grants the exemption from being a CCO for the following organisations: the Manawatu District Youth Development and Wellbeing Trust, the Fielding Civic Centre, the Awahuri Forest Kitchener Park Trust, the Camp Rangi Woods Trust, the Manawatu Wanganui Regional Disaster Relief Fund, the RNZ Ahakia Visitor Centre Trust, the MWLS, and Heartland Contractors.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hadfield, thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. And 11.8, we're on page 198. This is the application of the Common Seal. This is simply reporting to council formally when the seal has been used. And I'll hand it over to Shane.
So, councillors, there's essentially two times that seal is applied on a regular basis. The first one is council bylaw that's highlighted there. When the seal is affixed to that type of document, both the mayor and myself have to sign for all the warrants. That's pretty much operational. So the delegations manual, I sign those as a single. seal signature. So this is just reporting this back to council over the seal being applied.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
The warrants, are they issued to a new employee that covers them for the term of their employment? Is this like for dog control officers, animal control officers and things?
A lot of some of those are actually contractors who do our after hours noise. And for some reason they turn over quite regularly. So
I had a note here. Does this indicate high staff turnover?
no, some of those are actual external contractors. Some of them are new staff and some of them are staff that have moved into new positions within the organisations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further. So therefore we have that recommendation. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ford.
I move that the schedule of sealed documents be received as in the schedule below on page 198.
Thank you. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Hadfield. Thank you. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.
So this was the common seal as opposed to the leopard seal and the southern elephant seal, isn't it?
Yeah, and the fur seal.
And yeah,
Thank you.
just for clarification. So we have no late items today and no public excluded business today. So with that, I will declare our meeting closed. Just take a couple of minute break.